Hello and welcome to today's webcast. I'm Jim Parker, president of Digitel, and we're excited that you've taken time to share with us today Jim Cathcart, the author of the Self-Motivation Handbook. Before we get started with Jim, I just want to welcome those of you that are with us. You're watching this webcast through our Digitel interactive player. We have the opportunity for you to chat with others that are here and also to ask Jim questions directly. For those of you that don't know Jim, or if you've met Jim, he's a super guy. He's fun. We want to keep today very casual and spend the next 30 to 40 minutes just sharing with you a little about Jim and his book, and just to, have some fun here in our webcast. So before I introduce Jim, I just want to tell you a little bit about Jim has motivated me for the past 20 years. He's been a friend, a colleague, and he truly changes the energy in the room when Jim enters that room. He's been an educator, a motivator, and truly a guidance to so many people over the last 50 years. So I'm just thrilled to be able to introduce you to Jim Cathcart. Jim, welcome.
Hey, it's wonderful to be with you, Jim. Maybe I should call you James just so they don't get confused.
Yeah. Remember when we did the NSA live stream? It was the Jim and Jim show.
That's right. That was fun.
So, Jim, before we dive into motivation and about your book, can you take a couple of minutes and just share with our viewers a little about yourself and your family? And, you live in Southern California, but give us the 2-minute Reader's Digest overview of Jim Cathcart.
Okay. I was born to a family in Little Rock, Arkansas, where Dad was by the way, today would have been my dad's 101st birthday.
Oh,
so
wow.
Happy birthday, Clarence Earl Cathcart Jr. Dad was a telephone repairman. He had been in the Army in World War II, fought in Guadalcanal in the Philippines, and at age 20-something, when he was a young lieutenant or a captain, I don't know if he'd been promoted yet, he was appointed acting mayor of a city that we occupied in Japan. Wow. Anyway, an amazing guy, but a cool guy, and just, blue-collar telephone man. Mom was a housewife. My grandfather was an invalid from a stroke, couldn't speak or move, and he was in our front bedroom for 7 years of my childhood. I had one sister. She passed away at age 50, but she and I grew up together, and so we grew up in kind of a Leave It to Beaver, very, normal. That's a baby boomer reference for you millennials watching. Anyway, we grew up in a normal, quiet, peaceful, happy neighborhood with a good life, and I got a good start, and I didn't expect much. I expected to have a normal life, be a nice guy, retire at age 65, die at whatever the statistic average was for my gene pool, and that was it. And so I went to high school and graduated 176th out of 430. I went to college for a couple of years, dropped out, went back for a year, dropped out, never did complete the college degree. But one day in 1972, I heard Earl Nightingale on the radio in a motivational broadcast. And that day, something clicked in my brain, and I said, you know what? I could do what that guy's doing. If I just really, really work my buns off, since I don't have major intellect or athletic ability, I could focus for year after year after year and learn the field of personal development and maybe make a difference in this world. And here I am today, 40 years later in my speaking career. I've done 3,000 speeches around the world for 2,000 different audiences or companies, 3,000 different audiences. I've toured the world on a motorcycle. I'm a life member of the American Motorcyclists Association. I have a band, and I play rock and roll and sing songs with my wife and friends in nightclubs, and have done that around the world. I've written 17 books, in the process of writing number 18. And I've been inducted into the Speaker Hall of Fame, the Sales and Marketing Hall of Fame, and I've just been absolutely blessed.
Well, that's great. And you have been blessed. And I've met your wife, Paula, and she's wonderful. And I think you've been blessed from that alone.
Thank you.
So Jim, your book titled The Self-Motivation Handbook. You know, over the years, self-motivation has been a term that's been used by many.
Yeah.
What does self-motivation mean to you?
Well, I come back to the statement I made when I received the Golden Gavel from Toastmasters International. My topic was all leadership begins with self-leadership. It could have been all motivation begins with self-motivation. And the line that I used that evening to about 1,500 speakers from around the world was, I said, if you can't lead you, please don't lead me. And the same thing's true in motivation. If you can't motivate you, how in the world do you expect to motivate me and other people? You know, so what is motivation? Well, motivation's two words combined: motive, action. Motive without action is dreaming, right? Action without motive is just random behavior, okay? Motive and action, when you act on your motive, you are motivated. So that's what motivation is. People say, well, you know, I don't know. Motivation is temporary. No good. It doesn't last. And I love Zig Ziglar's line. Neither does a bath, but it's still a good idea now and again. Well, when you think about it, you know, a lot of people say, yeah, motivation, no, you know, it's superficial. It's temporary. It doesn't last. And I said, well, wait a minute. Do you eat? Well, of course I eat. You mean more than once? It doesn't last? Do you breathe? Doesn't last. Do you sleep? It doesn't last. Do you exercise? Doesn't last. Nothing lasts. Well, education lasts. No. Education is where you take in information and it goes into a filing system in your brain. It's in the cabinet, but it doesn't mean you're going to necessarily use it when you need it. What's on the desktop is what determines what knowledge gets applied. So education, even though it may have seemed permanent, is only useful if you activate it just before it's needed, like reading your briefing packet once more before you go into an important meeting.
So that's interesting, because I always thought motivation was merely taking action. But what I'm hearing from you is that you need to set those goals and continue your actions to achieve those goals for the motive.
Yeah. And I've had people say to me, well, I've got some people who aren't motivated. I say, excuse me. No, you don't. Well, I absolutely do. You don't know my people. I got people that just sit around and, you know, play computer games and take breaks 15 times a day, and they're not motivated. It's, correction. They are motivated. You just don't agree with their motives. Right? Yeah. I mean, they've got a motive to avoid work, to avoid responsibility, to distract themselves, to amuse themselves. Those are their motives. What you've got to do is get them to activate some better motives. Give them a bigger reason, a more compelling reason, a more meaningful reason to do what you want them to do. So when someone is not motivated in the way we want them motivated, we don't need to focus on their actions first. We need to focus on their motives and figure out what motive do I want them to have to activate, right? And of course, you can't give me a motive and expect me to get excited about it. It's got to connect with something inside of me, something in my heart or mind that I care about. And when you can activate that, then you've got something. Can I tell a quick story?
Sure, I'd love to.
Years ago, I had a guy working for me who was a sales agent for me. And he was doing a good job, but he came to me one day when we were doing a coaching session, and he said, I got to admit something. I don't want to work here for my career. I said, well, I can understand that. So what do you want to do for your career? He said, well, frankly, I want to open a surfing school on a tropical island. I said, wow. Well, now that's a cool dream. And he said, yeah, he said, but, you know, I felt guilty about it because, you know, I know you expect me to want to work here as my career. I said, no, I don't. I just expect you to be productive and make a contribution while you're here. I said, let's talk about your dream. And boy, his eyes lit up and he sat up a little taller and he told me the story of this wonderful school that he wanted to create and how he was going to be on an island where there wasn't a great deal of tourist traffic and he was going to get people there for surfing and so forth. And I said, let's identify what knowledge and skills you're going to need to make that succeed. How are you going to find your market? How are you going to package your experience for people? What kind of deals are you going to negotiate with the providers of the location, the lodging, the travel, the surfboards, the medical care, and et cetera? And he said, wow, I didn't think of all that. So we laid out this big plan of all the things he needed to know about. I said, now here's the question you need to ask yourself every day. How could I learn something today that would help me with that dream tomorrow? So in other words, I focused on his motives and he became a more motivated salesperson for me.
And I want you to know, I take that story and I apply that every day here. In fact, just yesterday, I had a new employee in the office and I was taking your story in my mind and I sit down and I say, so if I could provide you with your ultimate job, what would it be? And that gives me the ability of where would they love to be at that point when they go through the process. And many of them dream to be their own business owner or they want to do something else. But at least as long as they produce, like you say, while they're here, then it's a fair arrangement for the time they're working for me.
Yeah, another quick story, if I may. Many years ago in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I worked for the United States Junior Chamber of Commerce National Headquarters, the JCs, I was on their national headquarters staff. At the time, there were 356,000 JC members. So it was at the peak of the baby boom's involvement in civic clubs. And I was the guy in charge of leadership training. So I'm working at their national headquarters, and I told the people there, I don't aspire to stay here. I aspire to be a professional speaker and trainer. And they got it. They understood because that was a young person's organization, and you know, that's the way things were done. But a lot of organizations would try to discourage me from going the other direction and encourage me to focus more on being a contributor there. But as it turned out, for 2 years, I was one of the most productive of all the employees on their staff. And I loved my time there, and I made a big difference. Then I went to work for an insurance agency, but I told the general agent, I said, I'll move in with you and I'll work with your agents and you, but you need to understand, I don't aspire to a career in insurance. He said, I know you want to be a speaker and trainer. He said, you got to do it somewhere. So move in with us. We'll give you office space. We'll provide you with a monthly retainer. But the rest of the time, you go build your career. That man is still my best friend today. His name's Joe Willard. Lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And last month, or month before last, I took him as my guest on an all-expense-paid 10-day trip to China and Taiwan while I was there on a speaking tour. And I brought him up on stage and highlighted him as my mentor. And people were asking for his autograph, too.
That's great. So in the book, you mentioned 68 different ways to self-motivate yourself. Yeah. Why so many? Does it really take that many?
Nope, only takes the one you use.
There you go.
It's kind of like when you go to a grocery, you know, go to the supermarket, the grocery store. How many of those foods do you really need? Just the one you're going to eat today. That's all.
I see.
Yeah.
So in the book, you have over 250 motivational minutes.
Yeah.
How were you anticipating the reader to utilize that information? Is that designed for one a day, or how were you hoping?
Yeah, well, the origin of it was I came up with a weekly email series called the Acorn, related to my book, The Acorn Principle, Acorn e-letter, and it was a weekly 1-minute message that was in text. And a man contacted me years ago, and he said, let's do these for a radio broadcast. So record them and cut them to exactly 1 minute each. And I did. And we had 300 and something of them. I don't remember exactly how many. Let's say 320 of them. so that it would cover, excluding holidays, radio broadcast every day. And then I went back through them and I culled them down to to exactly 268 messages and put those messages into this book in its original draft. And then I went through and refined them further. So what I would like people to do is just take the book, keep it around them, keep it in their field of vision. And when they've got a spare moment, just take the book and do this. Just stop on any page. And what you'll find, this is 131, the value of a creed, the importance of having a creed you live by. This is your policy manual. What are the policies you operate by in your own personal life? Is the customer always right? That's another one. Each one of these takes 1 minute to read. A friend of mine that I play guitar with said, got your book the other day. He said, you kept me up. I couldn't put it down. You kept me from going to bed because I kept turning the page and saying, whoa, that's an interesting idea. So what I would do if I were the manager of a company that had distributed these, I would say, folks, what I want you to do when you receive this book is read through it in whatever way you want to, but find 3 ideas that you think have great value and tell me what the number of those 3 ideas are by next Friday. And then you keep a tally of all those ideas that come in. And of course, they're numbered for you right here in the book.
Sure.
And take the tally and then report that back to the group. And it'll make some of the other people curious about number 64. Why did Jim like that one instead of this other? And then you can take the top ideas, the most popular ones of all, and have group discussions around that with your own team. Because all of these are universal ideas about how to live more effectively, how to succeed in business, how to be a better person. And I don't expect many people will read the book cover to cover. But if people start exploring it like that, they're going to get curious and they're going to stay up a little bit later and read a couple more pages. And it'll be a good tool for a long time to come.
Yeah, I've obviously, we distributed the books at the ASAE conference, and we sent all of our clients one because we are, we're just so appreciative of their choosing Digitel as their company, and we wanted to provide them, and I really wanted to, be a supporter of yours. So I had the opportunity of reading much of the book on the way back from the ASAE conference in Salt Lake City. And it quickly came about to me that routine and schedule, almost like, when my kids were small, my wife would say, we need to keep the kids on a schedule. It seems like much of what you're writing is, this isn't just for a day or two. We need to change our patterns.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I talk about a process that I call the causation chain. It's how one thing affects another throughout a chain, a predictable and understandable chain of events. Your mindset, the way you look at the world, look at yourself, and look at other people, the way you see life in general, leads to the actions you take. Your actions are almost always consistent with your mindset. So your belief system about the way things are and ought to be influences your actions every single day in many ways that you don't even realize it. Well, your actions, once repeated over time, become habits. In a company, we would call those actions tasks, and we would call those habits processes. And the habits become your reputation. And the reputation, people know you by your repeated patterns. People recognize you by your face looking that way and not some other way. Oh, that's Jim Parker. I know that face anywhere. I know that voice anywhere. It's the patterns that we recognize. Okay. So our habits as a person tell the world what kind of person we are, whether we're honest or dishonest, whether we tend to be engaging and interactive or reclusive and withholding and withdrawn. Whether we tend to be a person who thinks about the bigger issues or gets hung up in the details. Those habits tell the world who we are. And your reputation, which is the way your habits are perceived, determines who's willing to spend time with you and who's not. In other words, your reputation actually influences which relationships you can develop and which ones you probably couldn't. And your reputations determine which doors are open and how big your future can be. So if you want a huge future, picture the big future you want. Let's say I want to be ruler of the world and owner of North America. It's just some enormous vision. I want to build the happiest place on earth, be Walt Disney. Okay, if that's the future you want, who do you need to know and who needs to be glad they know you back? It's not just who do you need to know. I know Wayne Gretzky, and he recognizes me when we see each other, but I don't know Wayne Gretzky.
Sure.
And he doesn't tell people, boy, am I glad I know Jim Cathcart, right? But still, I know Wayne Gretzky. But I'm talking about when you look at the future you want, ask yourself, who needs to be glad they know me? All right? If I want those people to be glad they know me, what kind of reputation must I earn and deserve in order to open the door to them so that they're not apprehensive about dealing with me? To get that reputation, what habits do I need in my life, in my business, in my day-to-day living? Okay? To get those habits, which actions should I require myself to take until they become habits? And what kind of thinking do I need day to day to keep me on that path? And that's why 1 minute at a time, each message in here is designed to help you have the mindset that will lead to those actions, habits, reputation, relationships, future.
So, Jim, our viewers today are association executives.
Yeah, like I used to be at the JC.
Yeah. And I know that you know that industry very well as a professional speaker. I have serviced that industry. It's a very challenging space because many of them have been requested by the boards to reduce their staffs.
Yeah.
They're expected to do so much with so little. Mm-hmm. What advice would you provide them to help them stay motivated in that difficult environment when expectations are really almost unreasonable, and yet they continue to march? I'm so impressed with how meeting planners and association executives get so much done with so little. What would you say to the association executives out there that may be, challenged with those types of struggles?
First, I understand what they're dealing with. I've been there. I've been not only an association member and still am, National Speakers Association, but I've been an association executive serving on the staff of the JCs when we had 100 personnel and 356,000 members. And we had to deal with all the things in that civic organization that a professional society or a trade association would have to deal with the exception of lobbying. And you're kind of at the whim of the board of directors, which is typically comprised of the members, and it turns over every year or so, and so you get those shocking moments of, oh my God, is that really going to happen? So it does tend to stun you from time to time and put you in a posture of feeling sometimes unmotivated because you've got to go through a cycle once again that you just went through and thought you had gotten it done,
Sure.
The one thing you can control every day is which motives you focus on. One thing you can control is the environment around you, what you see and what kind of tools, whether it's something like this or recordings you listen to or inspirational works you read or what kind of people you chat with in the casual moments that you occasionally have. Where's your mind focused? What are you looking at? What are you listening to? For example, when Paula and I first got married, one of the things she did, she was staying home with our new baby boy, and she started watching soap operas because a friend was watching soap operas during the day and watching those melodramas. They had something to talk about. Well, I came home occasionally during the day because I had a sales job at that time. And Paula would say, hey, look at this, watch. Let me tell you the backstory on this. And I found after a week or two of that, I started planning my day around getting home in order to watch the next episode of that. And then I noticed, I helicoptered up and looked at it from a higher point of view, and I noticed a pattern. I noticed that the way soap operas or TV dramas are structured is they have a story to tell that week that's maybe this big, but they stretch it out to a much larger size, and they build with moments of suspense up till Friday. And then on Friday, they kind of summarize the whole week and then give you a compelling reason to watch the next week.
Sure.
Right? And I realized that this was really sucking me in, and our life was starting to be built around assuring that we watch this TV drama. And I said, time out. First off, it's all built on fear and deception and dishonesty and infidelity and crime and hatred and jealousy. And good Lord, you know, this is feeding our minds something that's very, very destructive to us. Let's stop it. And she at first didn't want to stop it. And then finally I said, and maybe I was wrong in being this bold, but I said, I will destroy the television if we don't. And she said, okay. And we stopped watching daytime TV dramas, and our lives have been better because of it. I also picked up recordings on audio cassette back in those days of Earl Nightingale, and assured that every single day of my life I was listening to an uplifting or an inspiring recording while I was driving in my car, or while I was sitting around at home, you know, organizing things or cooking a hamburger on the grill. I would listen to the recordings. And I tell you, it reprogrammed my own worldview to the extent that I'm a much, much happier, healthier, and successful person today than I ever would have been the other way.
You know, it's amazing to hear you talk about that, because here I've spent 35 years of my life recording professional education and hoping that the world would access that. And that's part of what I'm proud of, is all those people that were able to access that education that they weren't able to get to because they may not have been at the meeting or they were at another session. And if I had only had a world filled of Jim Cathcarts, I probably would have retired by now. But I want to thank you for your dedication to recording, to listening to those recordings.
Thank you. What a nice thing to say.
So I know that you just got back from Asia.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I prefaced you in our dialogue ahead of time, but, you know, I'm anxious to hear, what is the difference between, what have you learned, or what did the trip teach you regarding motivation here in our country versus the motivation factors? What are some of the differences you learned regarding both cultures?
Thank you. Yeah, I toured China and Taiwan and spoke for several hours to thousands of people at a time in both countries, and just had a wonderful, wonderful experience overall with all the people there. One thing that struck me on my first visit to China last year, I did a multi-city tour, was every audience was 1,000 plus, and I had them for like 6 hours at a time. And they were so eager to learn, they would rip down walls to get to the information they wanted. I mean, they were taking notes. They were cheering me on. They were seeking information. They wanted to ask questions. They were just, you know, just voracious learners. Well, I've known a lot of people in our culture that have been that way too, but I tell you, as a general rule, that's the exception. That's not the rule.
Right.
In the United States. I don't think our culture, our society has encouraged learning nearly as much in the last decade as it did in previous generations. I think that even though education is highly prized and valued, and there are a lot of efforts to distribute information and training, I don't think the act of learning, the responsibility for taking on your own duty to become a more knowledgeable, more skilled person has been encouraged nearly enough. And I was encouraged through the Earl Nightingale inspirational material, to become a learner. And they used to say knowledge is power. Well, I've discovered since then, with a lot of reflection on this, knowledge is not where the power comes from. Knowledge is useful. Knowledge is a tool. Knowledge gives you abilities you wouldn't have without the knowledge. But trust is where the power is. And the people we trust are the people who have the most possibilities, not the people who know the most. Because back in the days before the internet, if you knew a lot, you were the resource. Well, today you can say, hey, Siri, what's the answer to this question? And you get answers that couldn't have been found in years of research in previous generations. Yeah. So we've got knowledge at our fingertips. Knowledge is not where the power is. Trust is where the power is. What causes people to trust other people? Patterns. Predictable patterns of behavior. In other words, your habits, the way you are, your demeanor, your language, the quality of your eye contact, whether you genuinely take an interest in other people or superficially take an interest and look for your turn to talk. Those kind of things. That's where it is. And contrasting the difference in the countries. Of course, in China, with me and the Chinese people, I don't speak Chinese, so they had to be very attentive to understand what I was saying. And likewise, I had to be hyper attentive to understand what they were asking. So that was sort of an ideal culture when it comes to the quality of attention we were paying to each other. But behind that quality of attention was my desire to truly offer value and their absolute hunger to learn things they could use to make their life better in a culture that has lots of restrictions that we don't have over here.
Interesting. So I want to take a break and invite our viewers to submit questions. If they have any questions, please, if you want to ask Jim anything regarding being a better person or just about Jim. I mean, I know more about Jim than most of you, and so you don't know, and Jim didn't allude to the fact, although you see the guitar and we played his music, Jim's a very skilled musician. He's also an incredible driving force in Southern California and hiking the mountains of that area. I almost am a little nervous about visiting Jim anymore because I'm afraid he's going to put my hiking boots on and make me climb 4,000 feet. So I want you to know that's going to be a barrier that I need to get around. But please send any questions in if you have any questions that you want to ask Jim or just any comments that we can comment on. So Jim, while we're waiting for those questions to come in, in your book, you wanted people to select and just read from the book, which is exactly, by the way, how I have used the book.
Excellent.
And I have picked it up and looked at it and read that 1 minute and then thought about how that might impact my life and how I can change things. Is there any one thing that you really think, okay, if you don't go to anything else in the book, you need to at least look at this one suggestion or idea or concept?
There are so many of them that I feel really strongly about, but based on the value I've seen other people get from them, because all these aren't just me sitting around noodling on what's a good idea. This is my 40 years as a speaker and trainer and coach. Seeing people actually use these ideas to make their own lives better. And I guess the organizing idea in the whole book is right there in those running shoes. I used to be fat. I grew up believing if it ain't fried, it ain't food. I grew up in the South, and hey, barbecue and bacon, that's the staff of life. So when I was newly married, I got married at age 23, and at age 26, I weighed 200 pounds. Now, I'm only 5'9". So this is me at 150 with a 30-inch waist at age 69 for yet one more week. So next week I'll be 70.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I'm running mountain trails and I'm working out and I'm playing rock and roll and I'm doing all these things. But back then I was not. So here I was, 26-year-old kid, smoking 2 packs a day, 50 pounds overweight, and working as a government clerk in a kind of a dead-end job. And that was at age 23 and 4. And then it accumulated over time to almost 200 pounds. And at the USJC's headquarters, my life was working on many fronts, but not physically. And so I decided one day, you know, if I'm going to preach how to succeed and how to motivate yourself and take charge of your life, I need to take charge of my physical life because I'm out of shape. So I quit smoking, and that was difficult, but I didn't try to quit. I just quit forever, for life. Never again, ever, as of January 25th, 1974, but who's counting? And I haven't smoked since, but I did go through 3 months of miserable withdrawal from cigarettes. Then I'm sitting there overweight, and I said, what could I do to get myself to lose weight again? Because I'd lost weight many times, but always gained it back. So I knew I could diet successfully, but I wanted to become a slender person. Okay, now there's the key. The difference between successfully dieting and becoming a slender person is night and day difference. Successfully dieting, you lose the weight. Nothing much changes except your weight temporarily. You may gain it back, probably would, okay, because of the patterns. You don't do a pattern change, then you go back to the old pattern. I said, what if slender people do that I don't do? What do slender people not do that I often do? How do slender people think? What's different between me and slender people? And then I made a commitment. I said, this was 1976. I said, I will become, by that time I was 30 years old. I said, I will become slender. I will become healthy, fit, and agile. And I'm going on a 5-year, pause for effect, 5-year change of regimen. So I changed the way I ate, changed the way I lived in relation to food and exercise and so forth. But I couldn't get myself to jog, and I wanted to be a runner. So I said, what can I get myself to do? I can get myself to put on my running shoes and walk out the front door and touch the curb. And I had friends that just rolled their eyes and said, that's absurd. That's juvenile. That's silly. It's useless. Well, I knew that I couldn't make myself run, but I could make myself get outside where I could run. So I said, every day, without exception, in cold and snow and heat and darkness of night, no matter what, if locusts are attacking, I'm going to put on my running shoes, run out to the curb, and then maybe come back in the house. So I did that every day for 5 years. In the first 6 months of that 5 years, I lost 52 pounds.
Wow.
I became slender, and I started running. At first, I would only go out and walk to the curb and then maybe walk down the street to the corner and back. And then after a while, I'd do that, and I'd do some push-ups. Or maybe I'd kind of slightly jog to the next intersection. And I kept stretching it little by little over time to where I finally got to where I could easily run 5 miles a day, do push-ups, sit-ups, and, you know, all kinds of other exercises. And my body just went, and I became slender. I had to replace I even had to have my wedding ring resized because it was too big for me.
Well, you know, we have a story like that here at Digital, one of our employees. Unfortunately, his motivating factor was he found himself in the hospital.
True.
And so after that, it did motivate him, and he's lost 85 pounds. He's completely changed the way he lives. He stands up while he works. We're so proud of Russ. And so, you know, I hope that maybe your book can motivate people prior to them having a medical situation or whatever that motivates you, because many times that's what does motivate people. Just like in any area, you know, they don't put a red light up in an intersection until there's an accident.
That's right.
It's kind of sad that we have to wait till that happens. So maybe your book will, you know, help people initiate that like you. You just cold turkey stopped, which is pretty impressive, you know.
Well, thank you. But, the interesting thing was I was never, as a kid, I was never the leader. I was never the standout. I was never the star student or the athlete or the team captain or anything like that. I was just a guy. I was just one of the crowd. A lot of people liked me. I was, pleasant to be around, but I wasn't the life of the party or anything like that. I didn't stand out in any way at all. And so when it came to the running, that idea of just put on your running shoes and walk out to the curb, I found that was the thing that made a difference for me. And not only in the sense of fitness and running shoes, but if I wanted to read a book that I needed to read, then I would tell myself, okay, I don't feel like reading right now, so I'm going to read the fourth word on page 26. You can see what I'm doing, right? I go to page 26. First off, I've had to thumb through, and I've noticed what's on other pages, but now then I'm on page 26, and I'm reading the fourth word, and I'm interested in that sentence and paragraph. And excuse me, I'll be right back.
Yeah, it's just getting started.
Yeah.
It's just really getting started.
Yeah. Person says, well, I should call some of my friends more often, but I don't feel like doing it. Just pick up the phone, dial the first number.
Well, Jim, I'm so excited that you've spent some time with us today, and
don't really tell me it's coming to a close. I don't want to leave.
I know. Well, I'm going to give you one more question, and I'm going to give our viewers an opportunity to provide any questions. But in closing, you have motivated so many people. Who has motivated you? Who inspired you in your life over the last 69 years? Who are some of the people that have inspired you?
Harold Gash was a salesman for Earl Nightingale's training materials. And after I had heard Nightingale on the radio that day, shortly thereafter, I met Harold. And he came to a JC's meeting, a local chapter meeting where I was involved long before I was hired by their national staff. And I made a presentation on a project that I was working on. And he said, Jim, can I talk with you after? I said, sure. And he said, we were outside alone. He said, you've got more potential than any young man I've ever known. Well, no one had ever spoken to me like that. And I don't know if he'd only known two other kids or what, but, here I was, a young adult who had never heard that kind of talk in my life. Yeah. And I said, what makes you think I've got potential? And he talked with me about that. And he said, I want you to come to work with me, and I want you to sell these motivational materials. I said, I don't know how to sell. He said, yes, you do. Don't worry about that. I'll teach you the techniques you need to learn. Well, anyway, he got me involved in the business of selling training materials door to door to businesses. And then after that, I went through a series of different positions and ended up on the staff of the Junior Chamber of Commerce. And then from there, went out to work for that insurance agency, built my speaking career. And ever since then, since 1976, I've been self-employed, and I've worked all over the world. And I've flown in private jets to Monaco. I've, spoken on cruise ships. I've spoken at the United Nations. I've received big awards and honors. Been president of the National Speakers Association. What?
Yeah.
How did this kid from Little Rock do all that stuff? Well, the answers are in here, and you can do it too. You don't have to be a remarkable prodigy. You can do it.
That's great. Well, I don't know how we can follow that up, because I agree with you. Just do it. And so I really want to thank you. I want to thank you for your 20 years of mentoring me, being a supporter of what Digitel does. And I just really do appreciate you giving us the opportunity to distribute your book to the people that provide us what we're able to do. And so I just want to thank you. I want to thank our viewers who joined us today. Digitel, this is our first broadcast in our new studio. We'll be launching Digitel TV in the next month. We'll be providing all kinds of new webcasts, all focusing on helping meeting planners and association executives be able to do their jobs better. We'll be doing our own professional development series, utilizing some of Jim and some of his colleagues. And we hope to help meeting planners and association executives deliver content online in a more engaging, professional, polished way. And we just thank you for your time, and we hope you have a great day. Thanks so much.